When DJMO talks are held, are transcripts kept? Is there call record or anything?
Yes, transcripts of some kind as well as a record of the discussions are available. They are the ones who came forward, who asked for time, and thereafter essentially asked for a ceasefire. As the Prime Minister has mentioned, we will not be confining ourselves to the foot soldiers or to some remote camps. We will be going after the headquarters, going after the leaders.
Field Marshal Munir meeting with Donald Trump. How does India view that?
It must be an embarrassment to any country that the military chief gets invited and the Prime Minister is nowhere to be seen. I mean, it's a very strange thing.
There were also reports that Chinese military and diplomatic officials were also present in their war rooms.
Collusion in terms of equipment, helping them out in various ways, perhaps with satellite imagery as well, could have happened, but definitely they did not take any active role. We have to engage with China diplomatically, but at the same time remain sort of militarily prepared for any misadventure. Trust is low.
When it comes to drones, where are we in this whole indigenization process?
India has significant manufacturing ecosystem for drones, but a lot of it is really for civilian drones. Military grade drones, not so much. It's something we'll have to build up quickly.
Speeding up procurement process, sir.
The maximum time taken for any procurement, even the most complex ones, should not exceed about 2 years.
Operation Sindoor, first time made in India weapons used.
The indigenous weapons that were used did very well, and BrahMos in fact was probably, you could even call it a game changer.
F-35A, are we buying it from America? What about the Russian Su-57Es?
So on both of these,
AMCA EOI which has come out. What was the thought process to open it for both private and public? We are not happy with the pace at which HAL is working.
you would like to create a level playing field where others can also bid. They have the first mover advantage, but the intent is to bring in some competition because monopolies are never good.
Namaste, Jai Hind. You're watching or listening to another edition of the NI podcast with Smita Prakash. My guest today is the Defence Secretary of India, Rajesh Kumar Singh. He heads the Department of Defence in the Indian government and is responsible for the defence budget, the defence policy, defence cooperation with foreign countries and other defence-related matters. This is the first ever podcast by a serving Defence Secretary of India. I'm joined in this conversation with my colleague Ajit Dubey. So thank you so much for being part of the podcast. I'm looking forward to it, and Ajit has got some questions also for you.
Sure.
I would just, before we go into the complex issues, I just want you to explain to some of our viewers who might be sitting abroad or to students who don't understand how the Defence Ministry works.
Yeah.
What is the job of a Defence Secretary in the Government of India, and how does the Defence Ministry work, especially in times of conflict?
Okay. So the Defence Ministry works under a Cabinet Minister, who of course is Rajnath Singh right now. There are 5 departments under it. These include the Department of Defence proper, which is a kind of a coordinating, budgeting arm. There is the Department of Military Affairs, which looks after mainly after the affairs of the 3 services. There is the Department of Ex-Servicemen Welfare, which looks after welfare, as would be obvious from the name. There is the Department of Defence Production, which looks after mainly the working of the defence PSUs, which are I think 16 in number, 7 old and 9 new. And there is also the Department of Defence Research and Development, which works under the chairman DRDO, who is ex-officio secretary of that department. These 5 departments work together in their respective domains. Now, coming to your question about what happens during wartime, we continue to work in our respective domains. The operational work, of course, is done by the services, but at the policy making and coordination level, I have a role. Of course, RM ultimately takes decisions. That is broadly it.
Raksha Mantri, RM.
Raksha Mantri,
Right.
RM is Raksha Mantri, yes.
Okay, let me jump to Operation Sindoor. There's a cessation of hostilities. The question on everybody's minds is whether India has increased, will increase its capacity and capability with regard to defence.
So, after any operation like this, you will do a kind of debrief or have a look at what you've achieved and where where things worked well and what didn't, and whether there were any gaps in capabilities that we need to fill. So that process is on. As part of that process, we've already authorized the services with emergency procurement powers up to 15% of the capital budget of their respective capital budget, you can say, for meeting their immediate requirements in terms of ammunition of different types, anything urgently required, that some of it they might have even used during the operation. In the longer term, we need to look at various other types of gaps that these operations might have thrown up. I don't want to get into specifics because that is not relevant and that need not be made public. But yes, we will work closely with our services to ensure that our procurement processes get speeded up to meet and fill up all those capability voids wherever they exist.
Right. So Operation Sindoor, I don't know how much you can tell us about it, but whatever you can tell us, when the Pahalgam attack happened and then Operation Sindoor happened, there was a period that, I guess the planning of the operation happened. As Defense Secretary, how much of time goes into this planning of an operation of the scale of Operation Sindoor? Though it lasted only for a few hours, in the sense 72 hours, I think, but still how much of planning goes into it and pre-planning in the sense that how war gaming is done? If you could tell us a little bit about that.
So, obviously, any such operation involves a meticulous amount of intelligence gathering, coordination among the different services and the intelligence agencies. And thereafter, you try to come up with precise targeting after identifying targets. Now, the operational details I will not be able to share because that is not even my domain. That is really for the services and the CDS to look at. But I can tell you that this particular operation was characterized by tremendous tri-service synergy as well as synergy with the intelligence agencies. And that is why if you were, I'm sure you were watching the first night strikes on the 9 identified targets went off so well. We achieved, I would say, almost 100% of what we set out to do. So yes, it was the result of a lot of coordination, planning, and that was what took us about 15 days. But the intent always was that this particular barbaric atrocity would be answered, and answered in such a way that we will not, as the Prime Minister has mentioned, we will not be confining ourselves to the foot soldiers or to some remote camps. We will be going after the headquarters, going after the leaders.
Right. On the second day, sir, when you saw those drones flying in, those swarms of drones flying in from Pakistan, as Defense Secretary of India, what was going on in your mind? Did you expect it? What was your first reaction?
Well, I mean, the reaction, of course, was that we are in for an escalatory phase, and that always involves a little bit of apprehension and excitement as well. I don't think we were too worried. I thought we have a fairly good multi-layered air defense mechanism. To some extent, my reading is that Pakistan was reacting because it felt that if it did not react, it would be acquiescing to a new normal where we would be able to come in and hit them deep in their heartland like Punjab in this manner. So whether they were, a lot of their anxiety to sort of reply stemmed from this feeling that this should not be the new normal, which Honorable Prime Minister has already said that this will be the new normal, where we will. Surprise is always in the side of the terrorist, but by establishing this escalation dominance on our side, we are ensuring that they should realize that there will be a response, its magnitude and its timing and everything else, time, place, everything would be in our hands. So that new normal is to be normalized and sort of internalized by them, and thereafter, if they still want to, come up with provocations, the assumption is, or the hope is, that they will think a few times.
So, as Defense Secretary, you're also in charge of defense cooperation with foreign countries. In the first 48 hours, was there reaction from other countries about our military operation? Were there queries? to you or to others in the government?
I think the queries of this type are normally addressed to our Ministry of External Affairs. I don't think there was too much of immediate reaction. What we wanted to do was to reassure through the MEA our friendly foreign countries at least as to what we intended to do, which was essentially only target terrorist infrastructure. We scrupulously avoided civilian as well as military infrastructure. So that was the kind of how should I describe it? That was the kind of message that we tried to convey to our allies and friendly foreign countries, that the intent was very clear, very limited, very calibrated. Further escalation was not in our mind. Of course, we had to respond if the other side tried to escalate.
So the second attacks that we did on the airstrips and on the air bases was as a result of Pakistan's aggression?
Very much so. I mean, they did respond to our limited, calibrated strikes on only on their terrorist headquarters and infrastructure by trying to hit our military establishment. In a sense, they took ownership of the terrorist as being the kind of their assets, and they responded by trying to hit our military assets. Most of their attacks failed, but there were a few which got through with minimal damage and minimal casualties. But once they did that, we had no option but to respond in kind, and our response was, I think, sufficiently severe to make them sort of quickly come forward. On the first night after the strike, they refused even to, talk to our DGMO about, to have a discussion at all. They only said that just wait for our response. It was a very terse kind of a rebuttal. On the day after these strikes on their airfields, they were the ones who came forward asking for time, asking whether we would be willing to meet them, talk to them, and thereafter, of course, asking for a cessation of the hostilities. So that sequence should be very clear that they were the ones who capitulated and asked for.
Like what you're saying, sir, the severity of strikes that we carried out, sir, about that, like Pakistanis have been celebrating all over the world about their so-called victory, because the army says that whatever happens, he has promoted himself to Field Marshal Asim Munir, and they are celebrating. As Defense Secretary, sir, I just want to ask you, the kind of attacks that the Indian Air Force and other forces carried out on Pakistani air bases, how big a victory was this, sir?
I would say that the fact that we were able to hit their most important air bases, including the one at Murkan, itself should make it very clear that these were, fairly significant losses that they suffered. Many of those airfields are still out of commission. There are other assets that have been damaged, as well as significant casualties as well. So I don't think anybody who has any expertise in this area has any doubt. For the Pakistanis, it is a self-serving narrative because it helps to ensure that the capture of the state apparatus by the military, which has sustained in that country for so many years, continues, which is why a country with a GDP which is 10% of ours, which is lower than at least 2 or 3 of our states, is able to divert money from its meager resources towards trying to sort of match India in terms of military build-up, of course in collusion with one of our northern neighbors.
Sir, you talked about the damage that we have caused. Any assessment of the aircraft or the number of aircraft that they have lost, or the number of airfields they would have lost in the attacks by Indian side?
We have some preliminary assessment, but until we sort of confirm it further, I'm not going to venture into. I would only say that in terms of both assets, material, as well as human, I wouldn't even say human, terrorist casualties, as well as military casualties on their side, the losses on their side is manifold anything that we have suffered.
So, on the cessation of hostilities, you gave us the sequence of the first day where DGMO, Pakistan DGMO refused to speak and gave a terse reply to say, wait for our thing. And the second time, it was they who said. Now, this variation in the interpretation of this, Pakistanis had something else to say, Donald Trump has something else to say, some of our opposition leaders has something else to say. So, when DGMO talks are held, I'm presuming on the phone, are transcripts kept? Is there call record or anything that can be proof that this conversation happened?
I think there is some kind of record of discussions. I'm not very sure if there are actual recordings as well. But yes, transcripts of some kind as well as a record of the discussions are available. I think you can take it from me and you can rest assured that the sequence I mentioned is correct. They are the ones who came forward, who asked for time and thereafter essentially asked for a ceasefire.
Sir, when they asked for cessation of hostilities, they sounded worried about if India continued to carry out operations.
That was our impression. Yes.
That they were. So I spoke about drones. Is that now the new normal? That because we are seeing that happening now in the Iran-Israel war, we saw it in the Ukraine-Russia war, we've seen it in all other operations since 2024. Is that now the new normal? When it comes to drones, where are we in this whole indigenization process and how much are we buying?
Yeah, so definitely nature of warfare is changing significantly. A lot of standoff weapons are being used, which means that you don't necessarily go into other territory unless you first establish dominance, as Israel has done recently in Iran. In our case, I think both countries used standoff weapons from our respective sites only, whether it is missiles or drones and loitering munitions. It is likely that this trend will continue and we'll therefore have to ensure that we have adequate unmanned capability of this type. I would say that India has significant manufacturing ecosystem for drones, but a lot of it is really for civilian drones. Military grade drones, not so much. There are, I would say, 3 to 4, 5 manufacturers who have some capacity in that area. It's something we'll have to build up quickly. And to the extent that, like all military purchases, it's a monopsony. The government is the only buyer. And I guess government will have to use its buying power to provide the resources, to give the visibility in terms of orders to that sort of small ecosystem, which hopefully will gradually become a large ecosystem of drone manufacturers of military grade, to start expanding their respective manufacturing capacities. That will involve to some extent transfers of technology as well, because a lot of the technology may not be available domestically. So I would say that we are looking at least 3 to 4 manufacturers who are coming up with this type of capacity in terms of military grade drones. We will encourage them through orders and through tenders so that they can start investing in this area even more, including tying up with technologies from outside.
Sir, in recent past, we have seen that even countries like Ukraine, Iran, Turkey, they have made a lot of advancements in drone technology, especially manufacturing of cheaper drones. So, would there be any focused approach from your side, sir, to encourage that? Because when the conflict was on, we know you were meeting a lot of industry people like Kalyani, Solar and others. So any specific focus on this area, sir?
Definitely there will be a focus, but as I said, Department of Defense is not a developmental department. We can't create schemes for providing subsidies like PLI to, say, drone manufacturers. That is what the Ministry of Civil Aviation does. What we will provide is, as I said, that given the volume that we can generate in terms of the size of the orders, that can be bigger than the combined turnover of all the other civilian drone, manufacturers in the country. That type of ensuring that they have a full order book if they make investments into military grade drones, that we will try to ensure by speeding up procurement and by giving them visibility in terms of orders.
So about weapons which were used in Operation Sindoor, first time made in India weapons used And if you could tell us how was their performance, and how much of it was used?
I would say that we used a mix of fully indigenous weapons, partly indigenous, meaning manufactured under license or under technology transfer, and foreign origin weapons in this. It was a good fusion of different types of weapons by our armed forces, done in a very cohesive and coordinated manner. Indian origin weapons, some of them worked very well. I mean, BrahMos did amazing. Akash also did very well. Also, our ability to retrofit some of our older AD systems with radar to improve their capability, upgrade their capabilities, particularly against things like drones and other types of low-flying kind of threats. Those all worked very well. So I'd say that yes, I mean, indigenous weapons, to the extent that they were deployed, did pretty well. But I wouldn't say that they were the only sort of thing that we were using. We were using a mix of foreign origin and indigenous weapons effectively, and the indigenous weapons that were used did very well, and BrahMos in fact was probably, you could even call it a game changer.
So in some conflicts which India has been involved in, without naming them, I'd like to say that post-conflict, there's talk about, there was intelligence failure, or there would be that we don't have the money to buy. So as a result of that, we had to take a bloody nose in certain sectors. These kind of things happen. In this operation, was there any lacuna of this kind?
No, I think the services were very well prepared. They were very confident in terms of their capacity and their ability to access the precision standoff weapons that we needed for this operation. If you're talking in general about whether there are still capability gaps that we need to fill and resource gaps that need to be plugged, I would say that at least in the recent past, in the last 10 years or so, you would find that our budget has been growing at a rate of about 7. I'm talking only about the modernization or the capital budget. That's been growing at about 7% a year. The difficulty has been in terms of absorbing some of that outlays, and in many years we've ended up surrendering money.
Like this year as well, sir.
This year we actually fully utilized our revised estimate, but at the RE stage we did have some reduction because the trend in expenditure was not adequate. Nonetheless, for the first time in the last 5 years, we actually fully utilized our revised estimates at least. More importantly, we signed contracts worth 2 lakh crores this year, which is double what has ever been done any time earlier. The highest that was ever achieved earlier was about 1 lakh crores in 23-24. So unless you speed up procurements, unless you do the contract signings, then get after the vendors to ensure that those contracts are fulfilled, unless you complete those steps, your absorptive capacity itself is a bigger constraint than the budgetary constraint, because now that we've fully utilized RE last year, we can ask for a higher share this year. More importantly, this year, given the pace of our current level of expenditure, we've already reached about 15% expenditure this year. So hopefully there will not be any cut. In fact, I'm very confident that there will not be any cut at the RE stage. So yeah, I mean, unless you...
But with the kind of requirements that are now coming up, sir,
yes,
can we expect an increase in the budget that has been provided?
So I mentioned the emergency procurement, which hopefully will, take care of about 15% of the overall allocation this year. That combined with the stepped up pace of current expenditure, we expect the existing BE to be fully protected at the RE stage. If we feel that there are additional requirements, the Ministry of Finance has always made it clear that on CapEx there is no constraint. They will give us whatever we need. So resources will not be a problem. I think on the procurement side, in terms of speeding up processes, that is probably the single most important thing that the Defence Secretary should be doing. And
that has been your...
that is my main priority in any case. And which is why I mentioned the contract signings last year. So if we are able to sustain those speeds, then automatically your utilization will be ensured, because a lot of your budget will go into these committed liabilities from the previous year's contracts.
So why emergency purchases? Why do we do emergency allocation? Is it because of this conflict, or why was it not thought of? We have
No, they
a
have been
hostile
going
neighbor.
on since.
No, this is the sixth edition
Sixth
of the
edition.
emergency procurement. It always is for a very specific purpose to meet quick replenishment required of ammunition, for example. I think the last one was for counterinsurgency, probably. So this present one is primarily because of the recent
Operation Sindoor.
operation. It gives them flexibility, the services flexibility to quickly order. They can avoid tendering also, or they can do limited tenders among suppliers. They restrict themselves to fellows who have readily available equipment with them, because the intent is that the orders should be fulfilled within a year. So in the normal contracts, we are talking about 3, 4, 5 years of periods for contract fulfillment. So this is meant for meeting quick emergent requirements by cutting through or short circuiting some of the other procedures. Again, these are meant
But there's
for,
transparency even then, because whenever one talks about defense purchases, that's always a question mark on that.
Yeah, I think there is transparency in these cases. I mean, we are really talking about procurements to be done directly at the level of the vice chiefs, with individual contracts limited to 300 crores, and with some flexibility in terms of directly, if they need a particular equipment, they can even go to that single supplier and give it directly without worrying about it being, leading to any complaints.
This time you have even allowed
Including
Buy
global.
Global, sir,
Including-
which you are looking after, sir.
Including Buy Global with the approval of the Defense Secretary.
Sir,
Yeah.
just wanted to ask you, you've been talking about speeding up procurement process, sir. So what are the steps that you have already taken, and what is the kind of the time reduction that you are looking at? Like, if you have to buy a missile right now, what is the time taken, and if once this reform is implemented, how much time that will take?
So the procurement process has half a dozen different steps, right from floating of the RFP to doing the field evaluation trials, thereafter doing the cost negotiations. Each of these steps at times have taken 1 to 2 years to do, and then you accumulate all of them and you end up with 5 to 6 years in procurement. Ideally, I would like to see a situation where the maximum time taken for any procurement, even the most complex ones, should not exceed about 2 years. And with the Rafael Marine recently, we achieved something close to that. So yeah, I mean, that is the idea. Some of these steps in this process have to be compressed, and that is the kind of accountability I'm sort of seeking from my own officers and from the services when it comes to field evaluation trials, which are mainly done by the services. I intend to sort of ensure that they also get it done in about 6 to 8 months rather than 2 years that they've been taking earlier. So that process has already been completed. We've issued directions on the compressed timelines for some of these step processes. The more long-term issue of simplifying the procedure itself, you're familiar with the DAP 20, the Defense Acquisition Procedure 20, which is a very bulky book. It's a Bible for all the defense industry. We need to make it simpler. A lot of redundant steps can be avoided. A lot of things can be done concurrently rather than sequentially, and a lot of simplification in terms of the kind of companies who can bid, where we've put in some unnecessary conditionalities. All those have to be removed. So for that, we have a committee now working. The target date is 6 months from today. So you'll have a new DAP. It will be DAP 25 rather than DAP 20. Hopefully, it will be much shorter and simpler and more effective in terms of outcomes rather than procedures.
So on exports, India is exporting to 85 countries.
Yeah.
Do you think that this makes traditional exporters of defense equipment, like say the US, Europe, or the other countries, a little
Chinese.
nervous, the Chinese? Does it make them nervous that here's a new supplier now in the market, and our exports, that is India's exports, come with no strings tied? So does that make it difficult for them, and is that the reason for increased isolation of India in the world?
And sir, adding to this, sir, Now, in recent conflict, our indigenous weapons have performed very well, like the Akash and the MR-SAM,
BrahMos.
BrahMos. So, is there a demand for them, and do you think they are now they will be directly in competition with the US and Chinese and countries which are friendly to us?
Yeah, so on the first part about isolation, I don't agree at all. I mean, you've seen the Prime Minister, he's just been to G7. He dropped off in a couple of countries. The kind of reception he's getting, there's no isolation at all, quite on the contrary. But this is a period of geopolitical turmoil and a lot of transactional kind of things are going on. I'm sure India will be able to more than hold its own in terms of its clout with foreign countries. On the issue of whether we are
competing with
in
Chinese,
terms of
American,
I don't think. I mean, see, we've had a 30x increase in our defense exports from about 14 years ago to about, I think the current year, last year rather, it was 23,000 odd crores. Target is to take it to 50,000 crores by 29, which I'm very confident we'll meet given the rate of growth that we are seeing. Also, the geopolitical conflicts, it obviously generates demand. Whether that will lead to it becoming a threat for the others, I mean, that's a little further off, because with all this increase, we are still about 2% of global arms trade. So, I mean, once we start sending these complex systems like BrahMos in larger numbers, right now we have only one buyer. If we get several more, when we start selling more of the artillery pieces where we now have good maturity and a good manufacturing ecosystem. Armored vehicles, again, good system, we can probably do more. But those are smaller numbers. The big ticket items are the missiles, the various types of aerial platforms. Once we start cracking the market in those areas is when people will start getting threatened. So, some way off, but I think there's no doubt that because you are 2%, there's also a lot of headroom in terms of how fast you can grow. So, with the proven capability of our platforms, whether it is multi-barrel rocket launchers, although, I mean, that's already a very robust platform. It wasn't used, but there is a lot of sort of inquiries about that.
The Pinaka,
all kinds of armored vehicles, artillery, again, very proven system, entirely indigenous, ATAGS. All of these will find good buyers. And as I said, with 2% share, there's a lot of room to grow. But it's some way off where before we can start saying that our exports are threatening the traditional large exporters.
Any like 3, 4 or 5 equipment that India has, and you can name, you can talk about them as potential big export, which have big export potential, sir.
Definitely, BrahMos and Akash, everybody is talking about. ATAGS, again, it's already well established. Bharat Forge also has some other orders for a towed gun system, which again will, I'm sure, find good markets. Our small arms, again, a lot of fairly large number of manufacturers with good quality technology. Some in DRDO, some through transfer technology from foreign OEMs have been set up in India. So in all of these areas, we will find a lot of markets. And finally, of course, we have a lot of good capacity in terms of ammunition of different types, particularly the 155 shells that everybody is seeking because of the ongoing conflicts.
A lot of European countries.
A lot of our exports. In fact, our exports by our public sector units picked up by almost 40% last year, whereas the private sector, which contributes 70% of our exports, grew at just below 10%. So yes, that huge demand for munitions because of the ongoing conflicts, all those are essentially adding some wings to our exports. But it's a long way to go, I would say.
So on aircraft, I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of talk about after J.D. Vance said he made this verbal offer of the F-35A. Are we buying it from America? Are we considering it? And what about the Russian Su-57Es?
So on both of these, whatever has been discussed has been informal. We don't really have any formal consultations going on these. Our intent, of course, will have to be to acquire critical technologies through selective foreign purchases, but we've not reached a stage where I can talk about anything specific being done. What I can talk about is that our fifth generation fighter, which will be the AMCA, for that we released the RFI yesterday. Our design wing of DRDO released it. For the first time, we've kept it open both for public and the private sector. The intent being that we need to have preferably at least 2 aircraft manufacturers in the country, if not more. And once that gets some traction, we hopefully will move towards self-reliance in this critical area. In terms of those 2 platforms that you mentioned, it's too premature for me to say anything.
What is the timeline for these that you're talking about?
No, for the AMCA, the timeline is about 8 years.
Okay.
And and for these other 2 platforms that you mentioned, we've really not started any formal discussions.
Right.
So it's too early for me to say anything.
Sir, you headed the committee which was, and that was very soon after you had taken over as Defense Secretary, sir,
Yeah.
on the capability development for the Indian Air Force.
Yes.
And I think the report mentions that we have to go for our indigenous fifth generation fighter, but also look at some options which are available in near future from outside. So did you have any specific capability in mind that you're looking at? Like there are only very few fifth generation manufacturers in the world, sir.
Yeah, so I mean, China is out, so there are only 2 actually, the ones that you mentioned. As I said, we've not reached any stage with either of those offers. We will in the future, perhaps, but as of now, there's nothing to share on that. What I have to share is, of course, that our own quest for a domestic fifth generation fighter has started, and that was also a committee headed by me, which essentially sort of gave the report that we need to open it up for the entire manufacturing ecosystem of the country. Whoever wants to come in should come in, and HAL will also gain from healthy competition of this type.
And like, sir, in this case, in case of the AMCA EOI which has come out, what was the thought process to open it for both private and public, sir? Was it to give a competitive kind of an environment in this sector, or we are not happy with the pace at which HAL is working?
So I'm not going to get drawn into any, I would say into any premature criticism of HAL. HAL has its own constraints. I mean, the LCA production line has not stabilized largely because of the delays in engine supplies from the US. But the fact is that they also have their order books full. I think that's 6 years of orders they already have with them. They have their hands full as well, and therefore, I mean, you can't explicitly bar anybody from competing, or particularly a public sector. But you would like to create a level playing field where others can also bid. They have the first mover advantage. They are the only military aircraft maker in the country, so they will always have that advantage. But the intent is to bring in some competition because monopolies are never good. For even a public sector monopoly, by its definition, any monopoly will lead to some level of inefficiency, and they will gain, or they will have the most to gain if you have healthy competition.
Is Russia still our prime supplier, and has the Russia-Ukraine war impacted our supplies in any manner?
Yeah, so they are one of our leading suppliers. I think the percentage would have come down, maybe 40% or so, from about 65-70% earlier. I mean, it's not just the Ukraine conflict, which of course has affected some supplies from Russia. The prime example being the S-400s, which are delayed, but where we now have a firm schedule. They'll come next year by April, and one battery by the end of the next year. Others, I mean, to be very frank, some of our contracts with Israel also got held up because of their issues, the conflict that they have. So yeah, it's probably inevitable. But the fact is that Israel and Russia and France, these are and increasingly the US also, they are some of our primary sort of weapon suppliers now. And to some extent, all of them have got affected by the supply chain disruptions that came after COVID and thereafter by the geopolitical conflicts. The GE engine in particular that was held up, that has been holding up the Tejas deliveries, is also a product, is also a consequence of supply chain disruption linked to some of their, sub vendors. It's not the OEM itself. So yeah, I mean, I think it's the general sort of phenomena after COVID, which has affected many industries, including the defense industry.
Sir, talking about fighter aircraft, now the Indian Air Force has been seeking more 4.5 generation plus fighter aircraft. Their choice has been the Rafale, but any movement in that direction? Because sir, the 114 MRFA competition has been we have been hearing about it, but not seeing any movement.
So, I mean, the idea is that things should move, but you should not see the movement. You should see only the result. So, again, I will not talk about specific procurements, but I would say that we will be looking at MRFA, and while the timelines are fluid, a lot of progress is being made, and you should expect to see some kind of a result. But obviously, during the process of those decision making, we don't necessarily want to keep the press informed at every step of the way. But yes, whether it is MRFA, whether it is other elements of our air power, all of that was part of my report of my committee, which dealt with gaps and capability gaps vis-a-vis the Indian Air Force, which needed quick resolution. All of those items we will, take it through the different phases of the procurement cycle, hopefully without too much publicity.
Okay.
And sir, these SAMs have been emerged as one of the key factors in the outcome of war, like what we are seeing in Iran, Israel, as well as our own conflicts, Operation Undersea Sindoor. Now, you said the S-400s are coming, the next two squadrons. You think with our project Kusha, the indigenous one, and they are also making a good progress, do you think in this light we need more systems to be bought from outside, or we would be focusing only on strengthening our long-range SAM requirements through indigenous route?
No, if you're saying whether S-400, the 5 batteries are enough, and thereafter we rely on Kusha, I think that was the intention originally. But the exact sort of timelines of both of these, of Kusha in particular, I am not entirely sure about. So if there is a time gap where some additional are required, I'm sure the Air Force will have a look at that. I don't have a ready answer. It's possible that if they feel they need a few more, one could always look at those options. As I've said before, India is now a $4 trillion economy. With a 2% budget, we can meet most of our modernization requirements. The problems are more in terms of ensuring that procurements don't take so much time, and thereafter in terms of getting our vendors from across the world to make deliveries on time.
So I'm going to come back to Operation Sindoor. As far as we know, it's cessation of hostilities, but the operation is still on. So what does that mean in the sense that our forces still deployed, they've not gone back to peacetime positions? What does that mean when you say that cessation of hostilities down, but operation still on?
I think the intent is to keep everybody on their toes. But no, in terms of deployments, of course, we have sort of withdrawn a bit, and I don't think there is any immediate sort of posturing that is going on, which is meant to be very aggressive. But I think the intent is to be aggressive. The idea is that we are ready, and we don't want. As I mentioned earlier, India will maintain its what they call in strategic terms as escalation dominance. We will decide the time and place. We are not leaving it to the terrorists to decide time and place. We will sort of change the script and make sure that they are never sure what we will do.
Right. Also, during this operation, we saw that there was mobilization of civil defense. There were, Agniveers who were first time put in a state of, I think, combat, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know the exact words. So, could you tell me how this conflict was different from earlier ones?
So Agniveers, of course, those who are already recruited were part of the Operation Sindoor in different through different formations. That is, they are very much part of the armed forces. So they will take part in operations wherever required. On the second issue of why some of the training and trial runs, etc., that were done, I think that was meant primarily the civil defense forces being mobilized. All that was essentially preparatory and precautionary. The intent was that in case things escalate, you should not be, your civil defense, your state governments, all of them should be prepared to know what their responsibilities and requirements would be in case there is things escalate. Thankfully, that was not required, but it was entirely a preparatory kind of an exercise done for certain border states. For
But
the
it
most
was
part.
more than just the border states, right? Everybody, I mean, Delhi is not at the border, but Delhi, Haryana was also working on towards civil defense. So there was a possibility that the area of influence of Operation Sindoor might extend beyond just the border states.
So, that is really depends on your adversary. From our side, it was always meant to be sort of controlled, calibrated, and non-escalatory. From their side, where they would go, we wouldn't know, and therefore, in that sense, certain precautionary steps were taken in terms of doing drills for civil defense of the type that you might need if hostilities escalate. Since that was not required. But in any case, it's always good to do these drills because a lot of our, we haven't seen any sort of major conflicts for a long time. So most people are not fully aware of what their roles are. So it's good to do these drills from time to time anyway.
Sir, on Op Sindoor, just want to ask you on this aspect, sir. This was mainly like we have talked about indigenous. We used a mix of weapons from indigenous sources as well as foreign Western sources. Now, on the other side, it was like even the Western press has also been writing about this, that it was Pakistan fighting with Chinese weapons. And now that collusion that we have been talking about is very open for everyone to see. And there were also reports that Chinese military and diplomatic officials were also present in their war rooms, which have not been denied by either China or Pakistan. So how do you see that collusion? Now it's in open and for everyone to see.
Collusion in terms of equipment, supplies, helping them out in various ways, perhaps with satellite imagery as well. All that probably could have happened, but definitely they did not take any active role. We have a delicate balance that we have to sort of achieve, where we have to engage with China diplomatically, but at the same time remain sort of militarily prepared for any misadventure. Trust is low, but it is, we should be cautiously optimistic because they have also sort of tried to, try to sort of a dialogue as a way of dispute resolution, and some steps are on at the highest level, at the SR level. So, we remain guarded. And we have to have vigilance, but it's clear that there is no active support from them. But there was, in terms of equipment, the Pakistanis don't have much of resources, so they will obviously do all this begging, borrowing, etc., to get equipment from anywhere they can, whether it is Turkey or with China. So we should be aware of that nexus and take appropriate steps, but. Obviously, the relationship with China is independent, and we have to sort of, as of now, the relationship is thawing, and we should stick to the path of dialogue with them.
So, two events which have happened in the past 24 hours, which I wanted your reaction on it. One is Field Marshal Munir meeting with Donald Trump. How does India view that? And the second one I want to ask you is that there was one expert, foreign relations or whatever expert in America, who said that seeing the conflict which is happening between Iran and Israel, if America was to get involved and denuclearize Iran, then it is possible that the nuclear equipment or whatever they have in Iran could be trucked and placed in Pakistan. Now, that is one of the possibilities that is being discussed in policy circles in America. How does that work in the sense that that is a direct threat to India? How can nuclear weapons now be brought into our region? Because it's an aggressive nation against India. So how do you view this?
I mean, it's too early to really
Premature,
say.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of it, I presume, is
Conjecture.
speculation. Why about Munir's visit to Washington again? I mean, this is really for the IMEA to respond. I don't have any great opinion on this, but it's surprising to me, and it is a little bit of a. I'm sure it must be an embarrassment to any country that the military chief gets invited and the prime minister is nowhere to be seen. I mean, it's a very strange thing. I always found it very strange also that this gentleman sits on something called the Investment Facilitation Council in Pakistan, which basically takes economic decisions. So it's a weird, structurally sort of imbalanced state where the military essentially has first claim on resources, which is why, as I said, with a $370 billion economy, they are able to preempt resources from their pressing social and economic needs into this kind of a conflict. But be that as it may, they are our neighbor, and we have to handle them, in such a way that we establish some level of deterrence towards them.
Sir, as Defense Secretary, you knew whatever happened during the war and they were seeking cessation of hostilities. So, when you saw the news about Munir promoting himself to Field Marshal, what was your first reaction? Did you think it's kind of fake news?
Actually, I had, in some of the circles where, some of the feedback that I was getting actually did anticipate that something like this could happen. So, yeah, it was, it was a kind of, how should I describe it? It was, you accepted it with a kind of a mixture of bemusement and incredulity in a way that such a absurdity can happen, but that's the way it goes. You can actually award yourself essentially a field marshal. I mean, the fact that you are going to your prime minister is not there in the White House, you are there, would indicate where the sort of power relationship lies there. So, in a sense, he's awarded himself the field marshal, I guess.
So we saw these images of the war room, CCS war room, the Prime Minister, the 3 chiefs of staff, and the others who were there in that room. Is a defense secretary also part of the war room, and how does it function? What happens there?
I wouldn't call it the war room. I think if you're talking about the CCS meetings, that is, the war room, when you say, I'm assuming you're talking about the operations part, which is not, that is left to the chiefs and the service chiefs only. There it is, what you take is a political direction, which of course HPM took, the Honorable Prime Minister took some very brave decisions in the sense that we crossed a lot of red lines and, created new sort of, a new paradigm in a way that terrorism will be answered in different ways from the past, where we used to practice forbearance. Now we are practicing what I called earlier as some kind of escalation dominance, where we decide time and place and not only the terrorists deciding time and place. But the war room is entirely with the services. The CCS gives the overall political leadership and direction.
So is a defense secretary part of, or do you have access to both those, the CCS as well as the war room?
See, I don't get into day-to-day operations, so I'm not part of that. But I do have access in the sense that I get a debriefing subsequently.
Okay, so what does a defense secretary do when we hear that there's a coordination that you do between the 3 services? What does that involve?
That involves more of, the budgeting, the capability development, a lot of other work across those 5 departments.
Talking about coordination with services, you and the air chief are squash partners, sir. You play squash. How does sometimes? How does that help in while playing? You like, do you get time कि अरे वो file आ रही है जा रही है type ऐसा?
Not at all. And it's never not required also. File तो मैं, in any case I clear everything the same day. And I mean, what we have is a relationship of any sportsman. We play and sort of rib each other. But if you're asking in terms of overall relationship between the services and the civilian part of the defense ministry, I think it's one of the best it's ever been. We are fully aligned under the leadership of
I've been hearing the same, sir.
The defense minister. So yeah, I mean, you can rest assured that the usual impression that people have that there's a lot of conflict or tension there is totally untrue, at least in the present dispensation. We are mostly not only aligned, but we are good friends as well.
Last question which I wanted to ask was, so when we have uniformed soldiers coming or talking, sometimes gossiping also, the line always is that, अरे बाबू लोग तो बहुत time लगाते हैं, clear नहीं होता है, MOD में time लगता है. Why is that? Is it because of past experiences that they've had, and have new changes happened, streamlining these lacuna?
I think those changes have happened. I've always believed more in outcomes than in procedures. But yeah, I mean, there are, the fact is that the system involves a lot of steps and a lot of collegiates, in most of which the services play a very active role. And a lot of the delays, frankly, happen in different parts of MOD, including in the services part. So the only way you can get it done faster is that you change the procedure itself, which is what I mentioned in terms of the new acquisition procedure in the future. Other is you try to drive the process much more, which means in my case that I review expenditure every week, so that you don't end up losing money as in the past. And I review their capability plans also every week. So the intent is to ensure that they have whatever they need. And whatever the experience of the past, I don't blame them, because there were too many scandals, too many controversies, too many issues which cropped up. That situation has changed now, and therefore I hope we'll be able, as I said, to ensure that decisions are taken on time and then get implemented on time. And therefore the armed forces have the equipment and the material and the other support they need to take on any challenges.
Right. On that note, thank you so much, sir, for spending time with us and explaining these complex matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching or listening to this edition of the NI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Do like or subscribe on whichever channel you have seen this or heard this. Namaste. Jai Hind. Click here to watch the previous episodes.